The Philippines is investigating further Chinese espionage with the arrest of 6 more Chinese nationals in Subic Bay in mid-March. Following that, China named the 3 alleged Filipino spies it arrested earlier in Hainan Province and released this video of them being questioned. Chinese police say they confessed to the crime of espionage at military sites. Manila contests the allegations, saying the confessions portrayed China favorably and made references to a non-existent Philippine agency. Is Chinese espionage in the Philippines on the rise? And if China is arresting Filipinos in retaliation, where could it lead? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Joining us today are Renato Cruz de Castro from Manila, De La Salle University Department of International Studies Distinguished Professor and National Zhengzhou University Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs Visiting Fellow. We also have in the studio with us Mathieu Duchatel, Institut Montaigne Resident Senior Fellow and Director of International Studies, and Ronan Fu, Academia Sinica Institute of Political Science Assistant Research Fellow. A very warm welcome to all of you on the show today. The latest espionage investigation centres on Grande Island, located at the mouth of Subic Bay and a site of strategic importance. 6 Chinese nationals and 1 Filipino are suspected of conducting covert surveillance on US and Philippine naval vessels in the area. The Chinese nationals, who pretended to be fishermen, were identified as He Ping, Xu Xining, Ye Tianwu, Ye Chaotan, Dick Ang and Su Anlong. The Filipino suspect acted as their security guard. The Chinese suspects were monitored lingering near the docks, according to the Philippine National Bureau of Investigation. They used drones under the guise of transporting bait while allegedly tracking military ship movements. Authorities seized photographs and documents of Philippine and US naval assets, as well as electronic gadgets containing surveillance photos and videos. The arrests took place on March 19th. Renato, let me come to you first. So why were these Chinese operating in Subic Bay? What is the strategic importance of Subic Bay?
Well, Grande Island is located at the mouth of Subic Bay. Subic Bay used to be, of course, Subic Naval Base when the Americans were there, but of course they withdrew in November 1992. But right now, of course, the Philippine Navy has been moving there. And the port area is also being used by the United States Marines, the United States Navy, and the United States Army. Every time they bring in their heavy supply during the time, especially a week from now, a few days from now, you'll be the Philippine military and the United States Armed Forces will be conducting a large scale Balikatan exercise. So all the heavy equipments that will be used during that military exercise will have to be brought through Subic Bay, where of course you have a huge port.
So Mathieu, very strategic there, as Renato said. Balikatan exercises all the movements essentially, or much of the movement to the West Philippine Sea, into the South China Sea. How dangerous is that?
Well, I think that, Subic Bay, from a Chinese perspective, has been extremely important in the past. It's been the location of major battles between the US and Japan during the Second World War, between the US and the Philippines during the US-Philippines War at the end of the 19th century. And what matters, in addition to what Renato just outlined from a Chinese perspective, is that Subic Bay is going to be increasingly important in the coming 10 years as the Navy of the Philippines really changes scale. And what we see now is a major construction program for the Philippines Navy that takes Subic Bay as a major facility. So if today the US Navy, Marine Forces, and also the US military uses Subic Bay for exercises and naval operations in the region, I think that in 5 years' time, especially if the Philippines Navy acquires submarines, and I think it's on the way, Subic Bay will be a major naval base for the Navy of the Philippines.
Philippine Navy did announce that it was considering converting Grande and Chiquita Islands into military reservations as part of that development of Subic Bay as a major naval base for the Philippines. And we've had Manila, Palawan, and now Subic Bay. A total of 12 suspects, Chinese suspects, are in Philippine custody. What is behind it all?
I think what China is trying to do is to systematically mapping Philippines military sites. And essentially what they are doing is preparing for the battle space. So you see, they're getting information from Manila, Palawan, and right now it's Subic Bay. And by the way, whoever controls the Subic Bay can observe, warship entering South China Sea or going toward China, Taiwan, actually. So that speaks to the strategic importance of this site. And what you can see is that they are trying to gather information as much as possible so that they know whenever some contingencies were to happen, they know what to prepare.
And Renato, so knowing or being able to monitor those movements, what's behind the broader ambitions there? Obviously, we've mentioned the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, and how about Taiwan, which was mentioned by Ronan? Again, is that about monitoring and thwarting efforts towards that?
Of course, I think it's something to do more or more sense of urgency in terms of how the Philippines might be used as a staging point for a possible Taiwan contingency, which of course became apparent as early as 2023, when the Philippines, of course, offered 4 additional EDCA sites in Luzon. And of course, that was also the target of the first alleged Chinese spy that was caught. Of course, the cover was he was doing a road survey for possible entry of Chinese electronic vehicles. So he's conducting this 3D reconnaissance, where of course you have the term used is real-time intelligence. What they able to collect when they got pictures of those EDCA sites here in Luzon, they were immediately transmitted into China. So I think it's more really a concern regarding how the Philippines might be used as a staging point for possible U.S. Reaction or intervention, just in case, of course, you have the push comes to shove in Taiwan. I think that's really give them the sense of urgency.
Okay, so let's stay on that theme. So, Mathieu, in that case, does it simply reflect increased U.S.-Philippine cooperation?
Well, I think, we are in a phase of transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, despite all the questions we might still have about the overall orientation of Trump's China policy. Has been the visit by DOD Secretary Hegseth to Japan and to the Philippines, during which he made it extremely clear that the Taiwan issue was the top priority for the US DOD. He used the term soul-pacing threat to describe the DOD's considerations towards East Asia, and he connected Japan and the Philippines to the Taiwan question. So here we see a form of a very clear continuity in the way the US sees Japan and the Philippines in the context of deterring a Taiwan conflict.
Mm-hmm. And Ronan, I'll let you add to that, but I wanted to ask you, so given Hegseth's visit and also the internal defense memo that was leaked, and also the Heritage Foundation's report that was based on, should we expect a lot more spying from China because of this unprecedented shift to the Indo-Pacific under Trump?
Yes, you should definitely expect that. And why? According to the Pentagon memo, basically deterring a Chinese invasion against Taiwan is the top priority. And in that, grander scheme, Philippines plays a crucial role. So that's the reason why, if you can understand what's going on between the Philippines and U.S. in terms of their maritime, joint exercises, and a lot of contingent plan, how they actually prepare for that. Chinese are trying to, like I said, gather as much information possible so that maybe not for now, but in the future, when they feel like they're ready, those information will be very valuable.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a quick question of Renato. Given the prominence of the Philippines in terms of a Taiwan contingency, is it within the Philippines' national interests to be taking on this role?
You have to take into account the powerful factor of geography. The Philippines is your closest neighbor. Taiwan is our closest neighbor. We still remember when the Philippines was first attacked a few hours after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the attack, of course, on Clark, and I'm staying in Cavite City where you have Sangli Naval Base, which was, of course, the base of the U.S. Asiatic Fleet during the Second World War. The Japanese planes from the Japanese Imperial Army came from Taiwan. So this is something that we still remember. Taiwan is so close to the Philippines. Plus, of course, the fact that we are a treaty ally of the United States. If push comes to shove with the United States, of course, we're bound together by the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. As in any alliances, we're bound to assist the United States if push comes to shove. And of course, the United States is also treaty bound to provide assistance to the Philippines, just in case, of course, you have a shooting incident in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea. So we don't want to be involved, but the reality of international relations is the fact geography and our alliance with the United States will put, in a way, put us in a situation where we are simply confronted with no choice at all.
Meanwhile, China has released the names of 3 Filipinos it's accusing of espionage in Hainan as David Cervanaz, Albert Edencia and Natalie Plizardo. Manila is contesting the allegations, saying the individuals are civilian scholarship students invited by China to Hainan Normal University as part of a sisterhood exchange between Palawan and Hainan. The Philippine National Security Agency says none have any links with or experience of intelligence or crime. The agency says the confessions portray China in a good light and are therefore suspicious in their view. They also mentioned the non-existent Philippine Intelligence Agency or Philippine Spy Intelligence Services. Mathieu, what evidence does Beijing have against these individuals?
Well, it's very unclear at this stage, but there are 2 things that we can say regarding intelligence operations targeting China and the way China uses national security legislation politically under Xi Jinping. I mean, the first thing is that indeed China has suffered intelligence operations, especially from the US and from Taiwan. And I think many remember the 2010-2012 cleansing of CIA operations in China because it's been well documented as far as those things can be documented. But in 2015-2016, there's been a major change in China with regards to prioritizing national security over everything and launching campaign against foreign spies. And clearly, China has been abusing its national security legislation. I think...
In what way?
Well, there's the question of the 2 Canadian Michaels who were arrested, some say kidnapped, after Huawei's Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Canada. So there's a history of retaliating using national legislation, national security legislation politically. And also there's a real asymmetry in the way those people who are arrested are treated in China, because they can be held incommunicado for over 6 months at designated facilities that are used for isolating them for a very long period of time. So it's huge pressure. I think this asymmetry matters to a great extent. And there's been a track record in the past 10 years of creating leverage through arrests in relations with Australia, Canada, now with the Philippines. It's also been the case that China has been using national security legislation to send political signals. So it's beyond the rule of law. It's really about strategy and politics.
And so, Ronan, should we be concerned about the safety of these Filipinos and other Filipinos in China if they can just be arbitrarily arrested and it seems, as the National Security Agency of the Philippines is saying, forced to make confessions?
Absolutely. And if I may, I want to actually compare the 2 cases. So unlike the Filipino case in Subic, where authority actually sees drones and photos and physical evidence of spying, what China provided is very thin and very little evidence. Besides the staged confessions, they had nothing. So that's the reason why the situation of those hostages are in jeopardy. Why? Because their destiny will be up for negotiation, really based on ground truth. If they are doing some spying, they are supposed to be put thrown into the jail and things like that. But if they are actually innocent and they're just the victims of some political forces, and I think now we are actually deeply worried about how they might be treated under the Chinese authority.
Renato, let me bring you back in. Tit for tat arrests, allegations of spying. Will this in any way hinder the investigation by the Philippines into Chinese espionage in Manila?
Well, there might be some concerns. The fact that the Chinese, of course, play the game in a very unfair manner. The fact that those alleged Chinese spies are still considered innocent. You know, it's the task of the state that basically have to prove them as guilty. Whereas in the case of the Filipinos who are in the custody of the Chinese, they're already considered as guilty. So that makes a lot of difference. Plus, of course, given the fact that, you know, families, like, for example, the wife of the alleged Chinese spy could visit her husband every now and then. And of course, they have their lawyers and they'll be tried in a civilian court. It's totally different in the case of those Filipinos. That really put us in a damn if you do, damn if you don't situation. So if we basically are, you know, take into account that they're doing this dastardly game of arresting innocent Filipinos, this put, of course, a sort of a dilemma on our part, whether we would have to do something about blatant Chinese intelligence operation happening right before our very eyes. So,
do you feel that this is where China wants to go with this? So they want to exert the pressure on Manila to stop these...
because they know how to play the game of hostage taking.
Do you think
of
it
hostage
also,
diplomacy?
And Renato, do you think it also, perhaps in a way, indicates that China is expecting more spy rings to be uncovered in the Philippines, and that's why it is proactively making these arrests?
I bet so, because I talked to a number of military officers. They basically said what we are basically seeing, those spy rings that are being exposed, are simply the tip of the iceberg.
Okay. Now, Chinese espionage has infiltrated Taiwan at the highest levels, now even the presidential office. At the end of March, 4 military officers were sentenced to prison, each with a maximum of 7 years for the crime of spying for China. Among them were 3 officers assigned to guard Taiwan's presidential office and 1 soldier from the Ministry of National Defense's Information Communications and Electronic Force Command. They accepted individual bribes of up to $14,000 and secretly photographed non-classified but sensitive internal documents from key security and intelligence units. Mathieu, spying on the presidential office, how concerning is the current threat to Taiwan, and what does it say about China's operations that it can reach that highest level?
You know, of course, it's a huge development that the presidential office was directly targeted and proven having been infiltrated. I think the key word is really the tip of the iceberg, except that in the case of Taiwan, the tip is much larger than in the case of the Philippines. Currently, under President Lai, I think that counter-infiltration has become a huge priority for the state, and we might hear new stories in the coming years. But what I think, you know, in the case of cross-strait relations, clearly military espionage is part of the game, it's part of the dynamic, it's been the case forever. But what really makes Taiwan special and different from the angle of infiltration, intelligence operation, is that it's not only about targeting the military, it's also about influencers, it's also about United Front work departments. So there are really 2 sides. One of them is influence, and the other one is actual traditional military espionage.
And Ronan, so what is behind this? What is China trying to make Taiwan do?
So, and I want to actually put things in perspective. Actually, in 2022, there were only like 10 people accused of spying for China. In 2024, the number has risen up to 64. So we are looking at the 10 to 64 differences. So it's intensifying. And what they're trying to do right at the moment is not just to focus on the military, diplomacy, and even some business, you know, important business cycle, people in business cycle. So to me, that seems like a comprehensive spying scheme that they are trying to operate.
Renato, bringing you back in, how would you compare the problem of Chinese espionage in Taiwan versus in the Philippines?
Well, in the case of the Philippines, it's also widespread, especially during the 6 years of the Duterte administration, when we practically opened our doors to Chinese workers, those who work in what we call the Philippine online gaming operation. Like you have the case in Central Luzon, where of course you have a mayor, a local government official who later was discovered to be a Chinese citizen, Alice Go. So, it's a question of who says more intensive. In the last 6 years of the Duterte administration, you really have massive entry. Of a given point in time, you have about 350,000 Chinese here working supposedly in those online gaming. How many of them are with United Front work? How many of them are with the Minister of State Security? How many of them are part of the party's United Front effort? And of course, also the activity of Chinese transnational criminal organizations.
Renato, I mean, Marcos's office was also, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., his office was also relatively recently, over the past few months or half a year, was hacked by the Chinese. For Taiwan, the case of Taiwan, we could say that China wants to make Taiwan accept its sovereignty, Chinese sovereignty. In summary, what would you say were the goals of Chinese espionage in the Philippines?
Number one, of course, it goes hand in hand with information operation, also economic statecraft. The term I use is subjugation. Really, basically to ensure that Philippines will act no different from Cambodia, especially when it comes to the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea issue, and more importantly, when it comes to Taiwan. When, of course, the Chinese will decide to basically push their agenda, their irredentist against Taiwan, they want the Philippines at least to be neutral when that situation would arise.
So subjugation, not too many differences, probably more similarities between Taiwan and the Philippines. Now, referring to China as our common enemy, Philippine Armed Forces Chief of Staff Romeo Brawner said during New Delhi's Raisina Dialogue Security Forum that the Philippines is hoping to expand the so-called Squad alliance, currently consisting of the US, Japan, the Philippines and Australia, with the inclusion of India. Squad is an informal security grouping cooperating on joint exercises and sharing intelligence with drills conducted in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone throughout 2024. Mathieu, in your view, could India ever be persuaded to join the Squad?
Well, the first thing is that Squad is still relatively new. It started in 2023. It's really about maritime security cooperation. You said it, intelligence sharing. I think the early signs are that India is quite reluctant to join Squad. I think they made it quite clear. The way that Squad has been seen in India is very different from the way the Quad has been approached. I think there is a reluctance from the Indian side to really get involved in something that is entirely focused on security, military cooperation. Even though the Quad has an element of security cooperation, it's much more than that. The signals that can be picked from India in the last few months are all relatively negative regarding joining the Squad. Of course, India could make a huge difference if it joined. It's the number 4 country in terms of military spending, but there's no intention yet.
Right. Do you think this gives India leverage, Ronan?
Possibly, but
over China?
For China, maybe, but at least for India, what they are considering is actually 2 things. Number 1, the strategic autonomy, and number 2, timing. In terms of strategic autonomy, Quad is more like a security and diplomatic dialogue, but Squad, like you said, is all for joint military exercises targeting some maritime dispute contingencies. For India, it's like putting too much eggs on the security basket at the moment. Yeah, but they actually didn't say no promptly. So I think they are entertaining both sides of the possibility in terms of timing. What you can see is that the Chinese and Indian border dispute has been de-escalated a bit. So that speaks to the reason why Indian side are hesitant to actually join Squad right away. So I really like your point. I think what they are trying to do at the moment is just try to hedge. So they are going to not say no to some possible dialogue, with some members from Squad, But at the same time, they perhaps will also talk to Beijing regarding some, concession from Beijing in return for them not to join Squad. I think that's also possible.
Okay. So final question to you, Renato. The Philippines obviously is aware. Philippines is obviously aware of, India's concern or wariness over military alliance. Why do you think Romeo Brawner suggested this invitation now?
I think it's a context for a good relation with India. The fact that India provided us our first, weapon system that we could use as a part of our anti-access area denial capability, and that's the BrahMos. Plus, of course, the relationship has been very good. So probably General Browner thought it's time for us to invite India. Of course, we also take into account that India is, playing the game of ensuring that it has strategic autonomy. Although India has been sending the message that, of course, their primary concern is, of course, China, and India's goal is to ensure that no single power dominates the Indo-Pacific region alone. So this is sort of a signal that we're getting from India.
Okay, we're going to have to end the show now. I want to thank all my guests in the studio, Mathieu Duchatel, Renato Fu, and in Manila, Renato Cruz de Castro. Thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.